The mirror was ancient, flawless. No cracks, no smudges, not a single fingerprint dulled its surface. It stood in the grimy window of a secondhand shop on a crumbling street, one of those forgotten alleys where the city seemed to hold its breath. Week after week, it waited, untouched, its gold filigree frame gleaming faintly under layers of dust. Until Thomas. It was a Tuesday in late November, the sky a flat, oppressive gray. Thomas Weaver, 34, shoulders slumped from years of carrying nothing but routine, trudged home from a corner store. He'd bought milk he didn't need, an excuse to escape the stale air of his apartment. His sneakers scuffed the cracked sidewalk, and his breath fogged in the chill. He wasn't thinking about mirrors. He wasn't thinking about much at all. Then he saw it. The shop was a relic, its sign, curios and oddities, faded to illegibility. The mirror sat propped against the window, catching what little light pierced the clouds. Its glass didn't reflect the street. It didn't reflect him. Instead, it shimmered, liquid-like, as if it could swallow the world if you stared too long. Thomas stopped, his plastic bag dangling forgotten in his hand. The filigree curled like vines, or maybe veins, pulsing faintly in his peripheral vision. He blinked, and the frame was still again. He didn't need a mirror. His one-bedroom apartment was a museum of neglect, mismatched furniture, a dying fern, takeout containers stacked like modern art. But his feet moved. His hand found his wallet. Inside, the shop smelled of mildew and old wood. A teenager at the counter, earbuds in, barely glanced up. "How much for the mirror?" Thomas's voice sounded foreign, hoarse. The kid shrugged, popping a bubble of gum. $100, delivery's extra. Thomas paid without haggling. He scribbled his address, his hands trembling slightly, and left, the milk warm in the bag by the time he reached his building. The mirror arrived at dawn. The delivery guy, a wiry man with a smoker's cough, leaned it against the hallway wall. The space was too narrow to hang it, so Thomas tilted it to catch the weak light filtering through a high window. It looked out of place, too grand for the peeling paint and scuffed floorboards. He told himself it was just decor, something to brighten the gloom. He didn't look at it again that day. Thomas's life was small. He worked remotely, coding for a faceless tech company, his days a blur of screens and silence. His phone buzzed with messages he ignored. Old college friends, a cousin, his mother, all fading into the background noise of a life he'd let slip away. He hadn't always been like this. Once, he'd had plans, a startup idea, a trip to Europe, a girlfriend who laughed at his bad puns. But years of not now had hardened into never. At night, he dreamed of parks he'd never visited, voices he couldn't place, and woke with a weight in his chest, like something was waiting for him. For 3 days, the mirror was just a mirror. On the 4th, he noticed it. He was passing by, coffee mug in hand, when a flicker caught his eye. Not light. Movement. His reflection lagged, a half-second delay, like a video feed buffering. He froze, staring. His reflection stared back, but its eyes were sharper, its posture straighter. It wore a blue flannel shirt Thomas hadn't touched in years, tucked away in a drawer he never opened. He blinked. The reflection synced again, mimicking him perfectly. "Long hours," he muttered, blaming the trick on exhaustion. His dreams had grown stranger since the mirror arrived. Flashes of a sunlit park, a woman's laugh, the smell of fresh-cut grass. He woke each morning feeling like he'd left something behind in the dream, something that clung to him, unfinished. On the 9th day, he caught it. He was scratching his arm, standing in the hallway, when the reflection didn't move. It stood still, arms at its sides, face calm, wearing that same blue flannel. But it wasn't just the shirt. The man in the mirror looked better. His skin was clearer, his jaw more defined, like a version of Thomas who went to the gym, who had a life. Thomas raised his hand. The reflection stayed still. He blinked, and it snapped back, mirroring him again. His heart thudded. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. He moved the mirror to the living room that night, propping it against the couch. He didn't know why. Just felt safer there, less like it was watching him sleep. The mirror's world began to change. A week later, Thomas noticed the room in the reflection wasn't his. The couch was a different shade, a deep green instead of his faded gray. The bookshelf held titles he didn't own, their spines bright and uncreased. His dead fern, brown and brittle, stood lush and green in the glass. And the man, still Thomas, but not, looked alive. Rested. He sat in a chair that didn't exist in Thomas's apartment, reading a book Thomas had never seen. Thomas tested it. He rearranged his furniture, dragging the couch to the other wall. The reflection's room stayed unchanged. He waved. The reflection waved back, but the motion felt rehearsed, like an actor playing a part. He opened his mouth to speak, and the reflection's lips moved too. But the words weren't his. They were softer, warmer, like a conversation with someone just out of frame. He threw a heavy quilt over the mirror. He considered smashing it. He stood over it with a hammer from a dusty toolbox, heart racing. But the thought felt wrong, dangerous, like the mirror might know, like it could push back. He dropped the hammer and left the quilt in place. The apartment began to shift. A bruise appeared on his forearm, purple and tender, with no memory of how it got there. A scuff marred the wall near the mirror, faint but new. The front door was locked when he swore he'd left it open. Small things, easy to dismiss, until they piled up like whispers. He started a journal, a spiral notebook from his desk. He logged everything. What he wore, gray hoodie jeans, what he ate, leftover pizza, black coffee. What the mirror showed, a man who wasn't him, a room that wasn't his. He checked the entries obsessively, grounding himself in the details. The mirror slipped further. One morning, the reflection stood in a kitchen Thomas didn't recognize. White cabinets, a gleaming countertop, the smell of coffee he couldn't smell. Another time, the reflection sat at a dining table with a woman, her face blurred but her laugh sharp, like a memory he couldn't place. She touched the reflection's arm, and Thomas felt a phantom warmth on his own skin. Sometimes, children darted through the frame, 2 of them, small, giggling, never looking at him, but knowing he was there. They belonged to that world. He didn't. He called his mother. "Tom, you sound tired," she said, her voice crackling through the phone. "You okay?" He wanted to tell her about the mirror, the reflection, the children, but the words stuck. "Just work," he lied. "Long hours." "Come visit," she said. "It's been too long." He promised he would. He didn't mean it. The call left him hollow. He hadn't seen his mother in 2 years, hadn't left the city in 5. The mirror's world felt closer than hers, more real than the life he'd let atrophy. The worst day came quietly. Thomas stood before the mirror, coffee mug in hand, the quilt pooled at his feet. He didn't remember uncovering it. The reflection held nothing. It wore a crisp navy jacket and polished shoes Thomas didn't own. It stood calm, not breathing in rhythm with him, just watching. Thomas raised his hand. The reflection didn't. He pressed his palm to the glass. It was warm, pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat, not his own. Behind the reflection, the world shimmered. Clean walls, warm light, A life that wasn't his but could be. A dog barked somewhere in that world, sharp and joyful. He yanked his hand back. The reflection smiled, slow and knowing, its eyes locking with his. The apartment wasn't his anymore. Photos appeared on the walls, smiling faces he didn't know, a family at a picnic, a dog he'd never seen. Drawers held keys to a car he didn't own, a leather wallet with a driver's license that wasn't his, but had his name. The fridge was stocked with fresh produce, meals he hadn't bought. A note in his handwriting sat on the counter. Dinner with M tonight. Don't be late. He didn't know an M. He tried to leave. Packed a bag, made it to the train station, the platform buzzing with commuters. But his body rebelled, stomach churning, head spinning, legs like concrete. The world tilted, and he saw himself in a shop window, but the reflection wore that navy jacket. He stumbled home in a fog, the bag slipping from his shoulder. The mirror was uncovered again. The journal betrayed him next. New entries appeared, neater than his scrawl. The job's going well. She's proud of me. Took the kids to the lake again. They love the swings. He's almost ready. His pen, his book, not his words. He stopped sleeping. The dreams were too vivid now. Parks, lakes, a woman's hand in his, children's laughter. Each morning, he woke with less of himself, as if the mirror was siphoning him away. He taped the quilt to the mirror's frame, sealing it like a tomb. It was back on the floor by nightfall. He called the shop. "Curios and oddities," the teenager answered, voice flat. "The mirror," Thomas said, his throat dry. "Where'd it come from?" "Dunno, been there forever. You want a refund or something?" Number just, "Has anyone else complained?" The kid laughed, short and sharp. "Man, it's a mirror. What's it gonna do, haunt you?" Thomas hung up. He searched online, fingers shaking. Haunted mirror. Cursed antique. Reflection, not mine. He found nothing but ghost stories and Reddit threads, none like his. One post mentioned a shop on a street like his, but the link was dead, the user's account deleted. His last journal entry was a scrawl. "It wants me gone. I don't know if I want to stay." On the 19th day, Thomas stood before the mirror, his reflection waiting. It stepped closer, hand pressing the glass where his had been. The surface softened, liquid under his touch. He didn't want to go. His apartment was a cage, dim, empty, a life half-lived. The world in the mirror was more: clean walls, warm light, a dog barking, children laughing, a woman waiting. It was everything he'd let slip away. He leaned in. The glass parted like water. Stepping through wasn't crossing a threshold. It was falling into a memory that wasn't his. The air was warm, scented with coffee and fresh laundry. The walls were bright, hung with photos of a family he didn't know, but felt he should. Birthday cards cluttered the counter, signed with names he couldn't read. A dog, a golden retriever, bounded in, tail wagging, and nudged his hand. He didn't have a dog. He turned to the mirror behind him. It showed his old apartment. Dark, barren. A man stood inside, pale, frantic, pounding the glass, his mouth open in a silent scream. Thomas's face, but not his life. He stepped back. The reflection faded to black. The new world never dimmed. The light stayed on, soft and warm. Food appeared when he looked. Steaming plates on the table, cold drinks in the fridge. He didn't tire, didn't hunger, but the stove was always warm, the fridge always full. Windows showed light, but no street, no sky, just a golden glow, endless and empty. Time blurred. Days, weeks, he couldn't tell. The mirror flickered every few days. a new face peering in, curious, drawn, tilting their head like he had. Thomas stood on the other side watching and smiled.